When Keanu Reeves walked into a rain-soaked diner, he expected nothing more than a hot coffee. Instead, he froze. The woman wiping tables in a faded pink apron was his ex, the love he lost 18 years ago. But why was she here? Hiding from him, and what devastating secret was she carrying? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The rain hadn't just started. It had been pounding the Pacific Northwest roads for hours, washing out the edges of the world and turning the pavement into a dark, churning river. Keanu Reeves gripped the handlebars of his vintage '78 Harley, every part of him soaked through. His leather jacket clung to his body, heavy as grief, and his gloves squelched with every twitch of his fingers. The engine began to sputter, a cough, a stutter, then silence. He coasted for a few yards, blinking through the blur, until he saw it. An old neon sign buzzing through the storm, barely alive. Millie's Diner. The E flickered. The sign swayed slightly in the wind. The place looked like it hadn't been remodeled in decades, but right now it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. He pulled up under the tiny awning and cut the ignition. Steam curled off the bike, mixing with the mist that wrapped around him like a cold breath. He dismounted, boots slapping into puddles, and walked straight for the door. A small silver bell jingled above his head as he stepped inside. Warmth hit him like a wave, the smell of bacon grease, strong coffee, and something sweet he couldn't name. The diner's interior glowed with the tired comfort of chrome stools, black and white tile floors, and red vinyl booths cracked at the seams. A few locals hunched over pie in conversation, their chatter low and steady. But when the door swung open and Keanu stepped in, dripping and quiet, heads turned. He nodded awkwardly at no one in particular and walked toward the counter. "Hey, sorry," he said, brushing water from his hair. "My bike just gave out down the road. You got a towel? Maybe a phone I could borrow?" Someone behind the counter moved to respond, but before a word was said, Keanu's eyes drifted past them, to the far end of the diner, and time stopped. A woman stood at a booth near the window, her back partially turned, wiping the table with slow, methodical movements. She wore a faded pink apron. Her dark hair was pulled into a low ponytail. Her shoulders slumped slightly, the way someone's do when the weight of the world has pressed on them for far too long. Then she turned. Keanu's breath caught. 18 years vanished in an instant. Alana Brooks. He hadn't said her name aloud in over a decade, but it had never left his mind. The woman he had loved more than anything. The one who vanished without a word after college, leaving nothing but memories and questions that haunted him even through the brightest moments of his life. She froze, mid-step, mid-wipe, eyes locking onto his. In that single instant, every ounce of color drained from her face. The rag fell from her hand to the floor. Her mouth parted slightly, as if she might speak, but no sound came. Then she turned and bolted through the swinging door that led into the kitchen. The door flapped once, twice, then stilled behind her. Keanu stood in place, frozen. The smell of coffee, the buzz of the overhead lights, the damp of his rain-soaked collar, everything faded beneath the shock pounding through his chest. For a moment, he forgot why he was there. Forgot the cold, the storm, the broken motorcycle. All he could think about was her, Alana. She looked different, of course. Older, thinner, her cheekbones more defined, her eyes a little heavier, like she hadn't slept a full night in years. But it was her. The same quiet grace in the way she moved, the same intensity in those dark eyes before they'd filled with fear and disappeared into the back room. He wanted to follow her, wanted to call her name, close the distance, demand to know why she left without a word all those years ago. But his legs wouldn't move. Not yet. He stood there, wet and still, the bell above the door jingling one last time in the quiet that followed. "You all right, sir?" a voice said softly behind him. Keanu turned. An older woman stood behind the counter, silver gray hair pulled into a loose bun, a faint dusting of flour on her apron. Her voice was kind, careful, like she already knew part of what he was feeling. Yeah, I think so," he said, but his voice betrayed him. She tilted her head, examining him gently. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He almost laughed. Almost said yes. But instead he nodded slowly, eyes drifting toward the closed kitchen door. "I'm Millie," she said, gesturing to herself. "I own the place. Storm's been messing up the phones, but you're welcome to sit. Dry off a bit. I'll bring you some coffee." "Thank you," he managed, and walked stiffly toward the closest booth. He slid into the red vinyl seat, cold and cracked, and leaned back. His jacket made a soft squish against the cushion. The bell jingled again as the wind howled through the parking lot outside. Millie brought him a mug of steaming black coffee and a towel. "We're not fancy, but the coffee's strong," she said with a smile. Keanu offered a quiet thanks. He wrapped the towel around his shoulders, the warmth creeping in slowly. Across the counter, on a corkboard cluttered with notes and old photos, his eyes landed on a picture. A teenage girl stood beside a trifold science fair board titled "Solar Power for Small Homes." In marker just below it, "Maya, first place, district finalist." His gaze lingered. "Maya?" His throat tightened. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, Keanu Reeves sat silently in a small-town diner, staring at a photo of a girl he'd never met, waiting for a woman he hadn't seen in 18 years to come back through a door that hadn't moved since she vanished. 10 minutes passed, maybe more. The bell over the door rang once as a couple left, their jackets pulled tight, heads down against the cold. Keanu didn't move. He barely touched the coffee. His eyes stayed locked on the kitchen door. It didn't budge. Rainwater dripped steadily from the hem of his jeans onto the checkered tile floor. Every so often, Millie would glance over, as if waiting to see if he'd say something more. But he didn't. Not yet. He was still trying to understand what he'd just seen. 18 years. He had thought about her every single day, in hotel rooms between shoots, on long drives after award shows, in the quiet moments when the world faded and the noise of fame turned to silence. Alana Brooks had never left him. Not in memory, not in spirit. And now here she was. Not in a classroom teaching children like she had dreamed. Not standing on a stage, inspiring future educators as she once told him she would. She was wiping tables in a roadside diner in a town most maps didn't bother labeling in bold. Keanu reached for the coffee again, more for the warmth than the taste. His hands were steady now, but his chest wasn't. There was a tightness he hadn't felt since the night she disappeared. He still remembered it, like it had just happened. How her apartment had been cleared out in a single weekend. How her phone stopped working. How not even her closest friends knew where she had gone. He'd searched for her. Quietly, respectfully. But after a year of nothing, no paper trail, no returned letters, no answers, he assumed she didn't want to be found. And now, without warning, without explanation, she was 10 feet away behind a kitchen door. A small clatter broke his thoughts. The kitchen door swung open slightly, just for a second, as a server walked through with a tray of pie. Keanu glanced up. In the brief space before it closed again, he saw the edge of a pink apron disappearing around a corner. No eye contact, no acknowledgement, but he knew it was her. The same posture, the same grace. Even now, if you believe second chances can still find us in the rain, tap like and tell me where you're watching from. The coffee grew cold, but Keanu Reeves wasn't going anywhere. He had walked into this diner for a towel and a working phone. He had just found the woman who shattered his heart, and now the question wasn't if he would speak to her. The question was, how? The storm pressed hard against the windows, each gust of wind slamming rain into the glass like it was trying to get inside. Keanu sat motionless in the corner booth, staring past the rim of his coffee mug. The towel Millie had given him lay draped over his shoulders, damp but warm, the scent of detergent and old wood lingering faintly. The diner lights buzzed overhead, casting soft reflections across the checkered floor. A puddle formed beneath the booth, his boots still dripping quietly, leaving a trail of water that matched the silence in his eyes. Millie leaned on the counter, arms crossed, watching him with the patient look of someone who had owned a diner for 30 years and seen more heartbreak than most therapists. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, pouring him a fresh cup of coffee without waiting for an answer. Keanu glanced up, forced a breath through his nose, then nodded once. "Something like that." He reached for the napkin on the table. It was coarse and thin, the kind that left lint on your fingers. He wiped his hands slowly, as if time would stretch with each motion. The warmth of the coffee in his palms barely touched the cold knot forming in his stomach. Outside, lightning split the sky in a quick, angry flash. Thunder rolled in seconds later. And then, like an old movie reel flickering to life, the memories came. He saw her again, not in a pink apron, not behind a diner counter, but how she had been when they were 21. They were lying on the grass in the campus quad, textbooks spread out but ignored, her head resting on his chest. She was laughing about something. A bee, maybe, or the way he pronounced allegorical. Her voice was soft, but when she laughed, it was like the whole world heard it. He remembered her reading to children in the city library, her voice animated, her fingers moving across the page with careful joy. She believed in stories, the way some people believed in medicine. Stories could heal. Stories could open locked doors. Late nights were their ritual. Not clubs, not parties, just the two of them, sharing noodles out of a single bowl in a tiny off-campus apartment with peeling linoleum and dreams bigger than the walls could contain. She wanted to teach, he wanted to act, but not for fame. He wanted to be in films that made people feel less alone. They called it the Pact. He'd lift people through stories on screens, and she'd do it with chalk dust and field trips. And then something cracked. It started with time. The calendar stopped feeling like a friend. His auditions picked up, small roles here and there, then larger ones. Suddenly he was flying out to New York, then LA, then Vancouver. Commercials turned into indie films, then a lead in a mid-budget drama that caught critics off guard. He was on the edge of something. Momentum, visibility, the beginnings of everything he'd worked for. But time with Alana grew thin. They were always trying to catch up with each other. Half-drunk cups of coffee, late-night voicemails, promises of tomorrow that never came. And then one afternoon, she told him about the fellowship. It was prestigious. Out of state. Fully funded. A 2-year program that would land her in underserved classrooms. Exactly the kind of mission she used to dream about back in their early days. But she looked terrified when she said it out loud, like she already knew the conversation would hurt more than help. He had smiled at first, told her he was proud, but the tension lingered between them like wet paint. She asked if they'd be okay. He said something about timing. She asked if he wanted her to stay. He said, "Do what's best for you." And she looked down like he'd just closed a door without meaning to. That night, the silence between them was louder than any storm. The weight of their careers, their dreams, their stubborn independence, it all sat between them like an unwelcome guest. They didn't yell. That was the strangest part. No slamming doors, no broken plates, just two people slowly drowning in their own unspoken fears. He remembered the final thing she said as she stepped out of his apartment. Don't let the world change your reasons." It haunted him for years. The next day, she was gone. No note, no message. Her apartment cleared, her number disconnected, Her parents said she needed space, time, clarity, but he knew better. He knew something had cracked deeper than words could repair. The napkin in his hand tore slightly. He hadn't realized how tight he was gripping it. He looked up. Millie had returned to the counter, her back turned, humming some old country tune under her breath. The place was quiet again, except for the storm and the soft buzz of fluorescent lights. The booth around him felt tighter, the air thicker. Alana was still in that kitchen, somewhere behind that swinging door. He wondered if she remembered that night the way he did, if the rain sounded the same to her, if 18 years of silence had carried the same ache. He hadn't come looking for her, but somehow the storm had brought him to the one person he'd never been able to forget. Keanu reached for the mug, took a sip of the bitter coffee and let it burn his tongue a little. The heat grounded him, reminded him he was no longer that 20-something kid who thought ambition could outrun heartbreak. But as the thunder rolled again, he realized something hadn't changed at all. The tremor in his hands, the emptiness where her voice used to live. His eyes drifted to the corkboard behind the counter, cluttered with notes and faded Polaroids. There was a picture of a teenage girl holding a science trophy, grinning proudly. Underneath it, written in thick marker, were the words, Maya, Science Fair. Maya. The name struck something in him, not recognition exactly, but gravity. It felt close, familiar in the way songs you've never heard still manage to stir old feelings. He stood up slowly and walked to the board, drawn by a magnet he couldn't name. The photo was recent, maybe a year old. The girl's smile was wide, confident, unguarded. Her hair was pulled into a ponytail, a strand of it falling across one eyebrow, and for a split second, Keanu's breath caught in his throat. There was something about her eyes, something that pulled a thread he wasn't ready to tug. The kitchen door swung open with a creak. Alana stepped out, holding a plate of pie for another customer. Her hair was tied back now, but her eyes met his for a flash. She paused when she saw him looking at the photo. A moment passed, silent, sharp, fragile. Then she turned away again, retreating to the back before he could say anything. But he stepped back from the corkboard, unsure if he'd imagined her reaction. But the seed was already planted. Maya? The name echoed louder now. Science Fair. A teenager. He sat back down in the booth, but his hands wouldn't stop moving. Folding the napkin, unfolding it, gripping the mug too tight. The storm kept pounding the roof, as if trying to shake loose answers he hadn't dared to ask. 18 years. A name he didn't recognize. A photo with eyes that looked just a little too familiar. And a woman in a pink apron who used to share his dreams, now walking the same floor like a stranger with too much history in her pockets. He didn't know what was waiting on the other side of the truth, but he knew one thing. He wasn't leaving this diner without finding out why she vanished, or what else she'd been carrying all these years. Alana returned to the diner floor with practiced calm, but her eyes never landed on Keanu, not once. She moved from table to table, pouring coffee into chipped white mugs, nodding politely to regulars and slipping fresh napkins under salt shakers like it was any other night. But every move felt too measured, too deliberate, like she was trying to stay busy enough not to feel. Keanu sat still in the corner booth, watching her from behind his coffee mug. He didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to make this harder. But when she finally neared his table, he could feel the air shift. His chest tightened. He set his mug down. She reached the edge of the booth and stood in silence, coffee pot in one hand, rag in the other. She didn't look at him, just stared at the sugar packet caddy like it held answers. Keanu spoke softly, so only she could hear. One word. Alana. Her breath caught. Her eyes finally lifted to meet his, and he saw a storm in them, deeper than the one pounding outside. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For a long second, the tension between them was thick enough to feel. Then she shook her head slightly. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "Not here." Her voice cracked on the last word. She glanced over her shoulder toward the corkboard behind the counter, then subtly tilted her chin in its direction. Keanu followed her gaze. Maya's shift schedule was pinned right next to her photo, a printed spreadsheet covered in notes. He saw 3 jobs listed beside her name: Millie's Diner, evenings; Freshco Supermarket, weekends; Prime Clean Services, night office cleaning, all circled in red ink, all crammed into 1 week. 14-hour days, maybe more. It hit him like a weight to the chest. This wasn't just about past wounds. This was about present survival. The quiet kind. The kind too proud to ask for help. He looked back at Alana. Her eyes had dropped again, but her jaw was set with quiet dignity. She wasn't hiding. She was protecting. Someone. Herself. Maya. Keanu nodded once. No questions. No pressure, just one simple truth in his voice. "I'll wait." She blinked hard. Her mouth tightened. Then she turned and walked to the next table, as if nothing had happened. But her hands trembled slightly when she poured the next cup. Keanu didn't move. He knew the story wasn't ready to be told yet. But the storm inside her, it was getting louder. The rain still hammered against the windows, a steady rhythm that filled the quiet lulls between orders and small talk. Keanu remained seated in the corner booth, his body still, but his thoughts restless. Every once in a while he glanced toward the kitchen, wondering if Alana would disappear again, wondering if this time she might stay. Behind the counter, Millie emerged from the back with a box of paper cups. She gave Keanu a knowing look, but didn't say a word, just placed the box down and nudged it into the cabinet. She'd seen all kinds of reunions and regrets in this diner over the years, but this one had gravity to it, like the past had pulled up a chair and refused to leave. A sudden clang broke the quiet. It came from behind the counter, a burst of water gushing over the lip of the dish sink. Someone had left the faucet running too long. Alana rushed over, flustered, snatched a mop from the closet, and began swiping the floor with practiced speed. A couple of customers turned their heads but quickly went back to their meals. It wasn't the first mess they'd seen in Millie's, and it wouldn't be the last. Keanu stood, walked slowly toward the spill. Alana didn't look up. "I've got it," she said, quick and curt, trying to protect the boundary she'd set. "I know," he replied gently. "I'm just here to help." He grabbed a second mop leaning against the closet door and began working the far end of the water, moving in quiet tandem with her. They mopped in silence, step by step, like a dance learned long ago. She didn't thank him. He didn't expect her to. For a moment, it was just the rhythm of soaked strings dragging across tile, the low buzz of the fridge motor, and the soft voices of people in booths, none of them paying attention to what was unfolding in the background. Keanu noticed how efficiently she worked. No wasted motion, no complaint. Her shoes were soaked, the hem of her jeans wet and clinging to her ankles. And still, she didn't slow down, didn't falter. He remembered her this way, capable, composed, carrying too much, saying too little. When the water was finally under control, she emptied her mop into the sink and turned away without a word. But as she passed him, her elbow brushed his. Not hard, not accidental, just enough to remind him she knew he was still there. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it wasn't dismissal either. It was something else, a crack in the wall, a breath beneath the silence. The mop was back in its place, the puddle was gone, and yet the tension hung heavier than before. Keanu returned to his booth, dripping less now but no drier inside. He watched Alana make her way to the soda machine, grabbing a clean cloth to wipe the chrome handle that hadn't been touched all night. It was just something to do. He knew that impulse well, how staying busy could mask the tremors of an unsettled heart. She was another woman. How staying busy could mask the tremors of an unsettled heart. She glanced toward the corkboard again, and he followed her gaze for a second time. Next to Maya's photo and work schedule, a sticky note had slipped loose, hanging by one corner. It read, "Don't forget. Maya's science fair, Thursday." She's excited. There was a tiny smiley face next to the word excited, drawn in faded purple ink. It was barely legible, but it said everything. He realized then this wasn't about avoiding him. It was about shielding Maya. Shielding their world, one that didn't include the ghost of a past life knocking on a rain-drenched door. Millie approached with a towel draped over her shoulder, wiping her hands on her apron. "He's a good one," Millie murmured, half watching Alana, half speaking to herself. "Shows up every shift, doesn't complain. Proud, though. Too proud to take a dime she hasn't earned." Keanu nodded, eyes never leaving Alana. "I remember." Millie tilted her head. "Didn't expect her to come back here, honestly. She left years ago, then one day there she was, asking for work. Said she had a daughter to raise. Never told me why she left in the first place, and I never asked." Keanu didn't reply. There was too much to say, and none of it would fit between coffee cups and clattering silverware. He simply nodded again, grateful Millie had taken her in. Grateful someone had. A new customer entered. The bell above the door gave its signature shrill ding, and the cold wind swept through the diner like a whisper of judgment. Alana moved instinctively, stepping behind the counter, retrieving a laminated menu, and welcoming the woman with that same polite nod she'd given every other stranger tonight. Keanu noticed how easily she disappeared into the motions, how her grace now lived in subtle acts of resilience, not declarations. She wasn't hiding. She was holding the weight of years with steady hands. He thought of their last night together, when everything they'd promised each other collapsed under the pressure of timing, ambition, and fear. He'd just booked his first major film role. She'd been offered a fellowship to study early childhood development in Minnesota. They argued, both afraid to be the one who gave up too much. The fight was ugly, sharp-edged, made worse by everything unsaid. She left before dawn. No goodbye, no forwarding address, only silence. Now, here they were, 18 years later, older, weathered, but not unrecognizable. Alana came back around the floor, this time with a coffee pot in hand again. She moved toward Keanu's booth slowly, eyes scanning the tables like she wasn't quite sure if she'd stop. She reached his table, their eyes met, neither smiled. She gently filled his cup. The scent of fresh roast mingled with the faint citrus cleaner on her hands. He noticed her breathing, shallow but steady. He didn't say a word. She placed the pot back on the warmer behind her, then turned, glanced at him one last time, and whispered, "We close in 30. Then she walked away. No promises, no explanations, just time, just space. And Keanu? He would wait. The rain had eased into a misty rhythm by the time the last customer left. The neon sign outside buzzed faintly, casting its pink glow over the emptied diner. Stools were flipped upside down on the counter, napkin dispensers wiped down. The place smelled of lemons and coffee grounds. Keanu remained in his booth, watching the quiet ballet of closure. Alana had disappeared into the back, not with drama but with a subtle retreat, the kind of exit people made when their emotions were tucked into tight corners. Millie moved slowly now, her shift near its end. She poured herself a small mug of decaf, then offered Keanu a refill. He nodded, sliding his cup forward. She filled it halfway, then eased onto the stool across from him, cup in hand. Her expression wasn't unkind, but there was caution behind her eyes. "She won't tell you anything," Millie said softly. "Not if she thinks it'll make her seem pitiful." Keanu stayed silent. He didn't want gossip. But Millie didn't speak like someone looking to indulge a story. She spoke like someone who'd been holding quiet truths for too long. She did teach. For a long time. You remember that, I'm sure. Elementary school, just outside Portland. Kids adored her. They'd hang on to her every word. Even parents wrote notes thanking her for waking their kids up to reading again. Millie paused, sipping her decaf. Then she met Evan. Evan Brooks. Kind man. Real old-school gentleman. Nothing flashy. He wasn't rich, but he had the sort of presence that made you feel safe, like someone had your back. Keanu nodded slowly. That sounded like the version of Alana he once knew, someone who would be drawn to substance over style. They married after 3 years together, Millie continued. Bought a little home out in Clackamas, nothing big, a porch, garden, quiet street. She stayed teaching. He worked for a supply company. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid. Then her voice lowered a little. But then Evan got sick, leukemia. It started as fatigue, a few unexplained bruises. By the time they caught it, it was already aggressive. Keanu's gaze dropped to the rim of his coffee cup. Millie didn't embellish. Her tone didn't beg for sympathy. It simply laid out the facts, as if peeling them layer by layer. She'd kept teaching for a while during the early rounds of treatment, but when the chemo started knocking him sideways, she took a leave of absence. Didn't want to leave him alone. Millie's eyes traced a spot on the counter, then returned to Keanu. She never went back. Hill tried, Millie said after a pause, her voice quieter now. After Evan passed, she looked into going back, but the world doesn't wait for you. Her license had lapsed. School budgets were tighter. Younger candidates came in, fresh out of grad school. And she was grieving. Still is in her own way. Keanu sat with his hands folded around the warm mug. The bitter coffee had gone cold, but he didn't care. He listened, not because he needed answers, but because Alana deserved to be seen, even in absence. Took whatever work she could get, Millie went on. Started here about 2 years ago, just nights at first, quiet shifts. She liked being around people without needing to talk too much. Keanu could see that. The way she moved through the diner earlier, steady, calm, invisible until she wasn't. It wasn't shame he'd seen in her eyes. It was pride. A quiet, stubborn kind that refused to be pitied. She doesn't take handouts, Millie said, almost with admiration. And believe me, we've tried. I've offered to bump her hours even when we didn't need the coverage. She always catches on and scales back. Said she won't take charity disguised as favor. Keanu's jaw clenched softly. He could still picture Alana's hands from when they were younger, always moving, always helping, always building something. Whether it was a lesson plan or a garden box or a dream. Now they wiped down counters and carried hot plates in silence. What about her daughter? He finally asked. The question barely rose above the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Millie's face lit with something close to pride. Maya? That girl's got a spark in her. Sharp as a tack. Doesn't say much, but when she does, she cuts to the truth. Just like her mother. She reached under the counter and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Carefully, she unfolded it and laid it in front of Keanu. It was a flyer from a regional science fair. Bold letters read, "Finalist announced," and beneath it, in handwritten ink, Maya Brooks, solar-powered water purification prototype. He built that in their kitchen, Millie said, with scraps from donation bins and help from a retired engineer down the road. Won first place in the regionals. Got offers to compete nationally. Keanu ran his fingers over the ink. The corners of the paper were bent, a thumbprint smudging one side. A child's dream, worn down by grown-up sacrifices. But the travel costs, hotels, entry fees, they don't come cheap, Millie added. Alana said it wasn't the right time. It never seemed to be. Keanu's eyes lingered on the flyer. The edges were frayed, as if it had been folded and unfolded too many times, handled by someone who couldn't let it go, but couldn't afford to believe in it either. That tension between hope and reality was more heartbreaking than anything else Millie had shared. "She deserves a chance," he said softly, almost to himself. Millie nodded, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "They both do. But Alana's not one to ask, never has been. You know how she is." Yes, he did. That was the part that hurt the most. She was still the same woman who used to pack lunches for the underfed kids at their old campus, the same woman who once emptied her savings to pay for a classmate's books. Back then, he had told her she gave too much. She said if people stopped giving, the world would forget how to feel. He didn't realize how much he missed that conviction until now. "She's been through hell," Millie added gently, "but she never once asked for pity. That's why when you walked in tonight, she looked like the floor dropped out from under her. Not because she's ashamed, but because you're part of the life she buried to survive." That struck something deep. He thought of how he must have looked to her, drying off at the booth, wearing a jacket that cost more than her month's rent, hair slicked back from the rain, the whole world behind him, while she was here, scrubbing sinks and serving coffee with hands that once cradled dreams. "And Evan?" he asked. Millie sighed. "El was a good man, kind, steady, worked as a librarian. They met after she started teaching. Maya was born about a year later. Then the diagnosis came. Aggressive leukemia. He fought it hard. Lasted longer than the doctors said he would, but after he passed, it all changed. The bills piled up. Insurance barely scratched the surface. She lost the house within 6 months, moved here to live with her aunt, but the woman passed not long after. Since then, it's just been Alana and Maya, one step at a time." Keanu felt the ache in his chest deepen. No theatrics, no headlines, just quiet. Daily battles no one clapped for. "Why didn't she reach out?" he asked, more to the silence than to Millie. The older woman looked at him, eyes kind but direct. "Because you were flying, and she was drowning. Some people would rather swallow the water than call for help from someone who already flew away." That truth hung between them. Keanu glanced back at the corkboard. There it was again, Maya's name, circled in red. Underneath it, 3 job schedules posted with pins. He followed the lines with his eyes, as if tracing a life mapped out in exhaustion. "I'm not here to disrupt her world," he said quietly. Millie smiled. "Then just be the part of it that remembers who she is." The early morning light broke gently over the roof of Millie's diner. The storm had passed, leaving behind streets washed clean and windows streaked with the memory of rain. Inside, the kitchen was already warm. The hum of the old refrigerator, the soft clink of utensils being set out, and the faint sizzle of something frying on the back burner filled the space. Maya entered through the rear door with quiet confidence, her steps practiced. She wore a faded gray hoodie 2 sizes too big and sneakers with duct tape along the soles. Her oversized backpack made her look smaller than she was. She unzipped it and pulled out a worn chemistry textbook and a half-folded notebook already peppered with sticky notes. She stopped when she spotted the pair of boots drying near the front register. Scuffed leather, still damp, soles muddy. Her brow furrowed in curiosity. She walked further in and turned toward the narrow hallway that led to the diner floor. That's when she saw Keanu, seated at one of the prep counters, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug, his elbows resting loosely on the table. "You the guy from last night?" she asked, not unkindly, just curious. Keanu looked up, surprised. He nodded. "Yeah. Rain didn't like my bike much." She smirked. "Welcome to Bend. Hungry?" Before he could answer, she was already cracking eggs into a skillet, like she'd been doing it since before she could read. Her movements were swift, purposeful. She opened a drawer and tossed him a fork without looking. "Millie keeps granola bars in her purse, but they taste like cardboard," she said. Keanu gave a small laugh. "Thanks. This smells better." She added a few diced vegetables and a pinch of salt, stirred everything together, then slid it onto a plate and handed it over like it was second nature. He glanced at her books. Homework? Kind of. My project for the regional fair. I'm designing a solar-powered heating system for senior homes. Nothing huge, just enough to keep utility bills down in the winter. She said it plainly, like it wasn't revolutionary, like kids all over the country were building solutions to fix broken systems. Keanu tilted his head. "You're doing that for fun?" She shrugged. "For necessity. We know a guy down the block, Mr. Tiller. He's on oxygen. Winter's brutal and his gas bill goes wild. I wanted to help." Her voice didn't hold pride or pity, just fact. Keanu leaned forward and tapped the paper where she'd drawn a circuit diagram. "Your resistor calculations here. They assume ideal output. Real sunlight's messier." She blinked. "You know circuits." Enough to spot a hiccup. They bent over the notebook together, shoulders nearly touching, as he sketched a slight adjustment in pencil. Her face lit up as she followed his logic. "That's why the power dropped when I ran it in the alley. I thought the panel was busted." He grinned. "Nah, just needed a different angle." "Wow," she said softly, eyes bright. "That actually fixes everything." Maya tore a sheet from her notebook and started redrawing the layout, mumbling numbers to herself with newfound confidence. Her brow furrowed in thought, but her smile didn't fade. Keanu watched her work in silence for a moment. There was something familiar in her intensity. The way she chewed lightly on the edge of her pen when stuck, the way her fingers tapped the paper in rhythm with her thinking. It stirred something quiet in him, a memory he couldn't place yet, like a song half heard on the wind. She flipped the page and held it up proudly. "Okay, so if I update the configuration and swap out the mount, I can increase sunlight capture by maybe 10%, even on cloudy days. Which means Mr. Tiller doesn't need to crank the heat just to breathe." "Looks like it," Keanu said, impressed. "Smart fix." "It's not perfect," she added. "The materials still cost too much, especially the stabilizer bracket and the converter. That's where I keep getting stuck. I have ideas, but ideas don't swipe at the register." "How much are you short?" She hesitated. $280. That gets me everything I need to build a prototype. My teacher said if I can make it work, she'll help me submit it to the state-level competition in Salem, but..." Her voice trailed off as she wiped her hands on a kitchen towel. "That's a lot of money for a maybe." Keanu nodded slowly. He didn't offer anything, didn't rush to reach into his wallet or throw a solution at her. He knew that look. Pride, dignity, a lifetime of watching her mother take the long way around because shortcuts came with strings. He respected that, maybe more than anything else. "So you're a chef, a scientist, and you fix heating systems." She smirked. "And I mop floors, shelve canned beans, and clean dentist offices after midnight. But yeah, I like puzzles." "Sounds like your plate's pretty full." "Sometimes it feels like a buffet I didn't ask for," she admitted, laughing softly. "But my mom says if you can't clear the whole table, just clear your corner. One dish at a time." Keanu smiled at that. She's right. Maya glanced toward the ceiling, where faint footsteps could be heard upstairs. "She's probably up. She works the breakfast shift today. Millie lets her sleep in a bit sometimes if the night was rough." Keanu followed her gaze. A moment passed between them, unspoken understanding. "I'm Keanu," he said, offering his hand. She shook it firmly. "Maya." He smiled. "Nice to finally meet you." "Same," she said, then paused. "You're not just some guy from the rainstorm, are you?" Before he could answer, the stairs creaked. Maya tore a sheet from her notebook and started redrawing the layout, mumbling numbers to herself with newfound confidence. Her brow furrowed in thought, but her smile didn't fade. Keanu watched her work in silence for a moment. There was something familiar in her intensity, the way she chewed lightly on the edge of her pen when stuck, the way her fingers tapped the paper in rhythm with her thinking. It stirred something quiet in him, a memory he couldn't place yet, like a song half heard on the wind. She flipped the page and held it up proudly. Okay, so if I update the configuration and swap out the mount, I can increase sunlight capture by maybe 10%, even on cloudy days, which means Mr. Tiller doesn't need to crank the heat just to breathe. Looks like it, Keanu said, impressed. Smart fix. It's not perfect, she added. The materials still cost too much, especially the stabilizer bracket and the converter. That's where I keep getting stuck. I have ideas, but ideas don't swipe at the register. How much are you short? She hesitated. $280. That gets me everything I need to build a prototype. My teacher said if I can make it work, she'll help me submit it to the state-level competition in Salem. But her voice trailed off as she wiped her hands on a kitchen towel. That's a lot of money for a maybe. Keanu nodded slowly. He didn't offer anything, didn't rush to reach into his wallet or throw a solution at her. He knew that look. Pride, dignity, a lifetime of watching her mother take the long way around because shortcuts came with strings. He respected that, maybe more than anything else. So you're a chef, a scientist, and you fix heating systems? She smirked. And I mop floors, shelve canned beans, and clean dentist offices after midnight. But yeah, I like puzzles. Sounds like your plate's pretty full. Sometimes it feels like a buffet I didn't ask for, she admitted, laughing softly. But my mom says if you can't clear the whole table, just clear your corner. One dish at a time. Keanu smiled at that. She's right. Maya glanced toward the ceiling, where faint footsteps could be heard upstairs. She's probably up. She works the breakfast shift today. Millie lets her sleep in a bit sometimes, if the night was rough. Keanu followed her gaze. A moment passed between them, unspoken understanding. I'm Keanu, he said, offering his hand. She shook it firmly. Maya. He smiled. Nice to finally meet you. Same, she said, then paused. You're not just some guy from the rainstorm, are you? Before he could answer, the stairs creaked. The morning air still held the chill of last night's storm, but the sky outside had softened into a pale, forgiving blue. Inside the diner, Keanu stood near the front counter, a quiet rhythm in his breath as he studied Maya's notebook, left behind in her hurry to get to school. It was open to a detailed schematic. Her solar unit's wiring grid laid out in black pen, red ink, and 2 small smudges of syrup. He wasn't touching anything, just looking, reading, admiring. He had seen plenty of scripts in his time, plenty of blueprints too, but there was something about this, about the earnest precision in her lines, the hopeful scribbles of "test this first" in the margins, that made it feel sacred. Behind him, soft footsteps on creaking stairs. Alana. He turned just as she reached the bottom step, her eyes landing immediately on the open notebook in front of him. The tension moved through her shoulders like a jolt of static. Don't make promises you can't keep, she said, her voice low, her words clipped. Keanu didn't flinch. He looked up, calm. I didn't. She crossed the floor slowly, keeping her distance. That notebook? Those dreams? They've cost her. We've both worked too hard to build something real out of all that's been lost. I'm not trying to take anything from her, Keanu replied gently, just admiring good work. Alana studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. People like you come in with solutions, she said, with grand gestures. You light up someone's world, and then, when the cameras are gone, so are you. Keanu shook his head. There are no cameras, no speeches. I didn't come here to play the hero. Then why are you still here? I stayed because she reminds me of you. The way you used to look when you believed anything was possible. The way you talked about change, like it could start with one person and ripple out. I see that in Maya. Hey! Alana blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity. Then she folded her arms, shielding herself. We don't need saving. I know, Keanu said. You're not drowning, you're climbing, And I don't want to pull you up. I just want to clear a few stones from the path so you don't trip while carrying everything on your own. A pause. That's different, he added quietly. That's room to breathe, not rescue. Alana didn't reply, but she didn't walk away either. Alana stepped closer, slowly, as though testing the weight of his words. Her gaze shifted between the open notebook and Keanu's tired, honest eyes. She saw no pity there, just presence, and that unsettled her more than she expected. You really think that girl can change the world with a couple wires and a soldering iron? She asked. Keanu smiled gently. No, not just with that, but with her heart, her mind. The way she looks at a problem like it's a puzzle she refuses to leave unsolved. That's not something you see every day. Alana sighed and pulled out a chair. You didn't know her when she stopped talking for a year after Evan passed, or when I had to explain why we were sleeping in the back of a used van instead of her own bed. She doesn't just want to fix things. She wants to undo every injustice. Keanu sat, folding his hands in front of him. So did you. And you still do. You just got tired of being disappointed. She looked up sharply, then softened. Maybe. Or maybe I just stopped expecting the world to make room for us. He nodded. That's why I'm not offering room, just space, a little extra oxygen. Alana leaned back, arms crossed. Do you know how many times people offered us things we couldn't accept without selling our dignity? Church drives, leftover boxes, scholarship scams. I'm not offering anything, Keanu said plainly. Not yet, maybe not ever. I'm just sitting here, listening, and watching a young girl make sense of the world with tools she probably bought, piece by piece, saving for weeks. Alana looked down at the notebook again. The words budget for winter batch were scrawled under a hand-drawn diagram. She recognized the handwriting, but more than that, she recognized the hope behind it. Maya's hope. Her daughter's stubborn, beautiful hope that things could change if she just worked hard enough. You know, she wants to present that project at the state fair, Alana said after a long pause. Her teacher's pushing for it. Says she's got the mind for MIT. She does, Keanu replied. We can't afford it. Not the parts, not the travel, not even the entry fee. Then what? Alana's eyes grew fierce. Then we let it go. We learn to live within our limits. Keanu let the silence stretch. Finally, he said, You taught her to dream. Don't punish her for still believing. Alana looked away, blinking fast. The wall of pride was still standing, but it had a hairline crack now, just enough to let the light in. The morning light had begun to fade into the early gray of an overcast afternoon. Outside, traffic resumed in its slow, aimless crawl. Inside the diner, the silence between them was fragile. Not awkward, just full. Alana stood gripping a towel that didn't need wringing. Her jaw tightened as if she were holding back a truth too heavy to say aloud. You remember, she finally said, when we used to talk about building something together? Not just our own careers, something real, for others. Keanu nodded slowly. You wanted a literacy center. I wanted to make films that reached kids in places no teacher could go. She offered a rueful smile. You got closer than I did. He shook his head. I never forgot those conversations, Alana. You were the first person who made me believe that stories mattered more when they reached the forgotten. She exhaled. Yeah, well, somewhere between unpaid medical leave and bankruptcy court, I stopped thinking about changing the world. I just wanted to keep Maya fed. She's more than fed, he replied gently. She's inspired. That touched something raw in her, something she wasn't ready to name. She turned toward the register, pretending to organize receipts. Her voice lowered, almost to a whisper. After Evan got sick, we sold everything. First the car, then the piano. I even let go of my grandmother's ring, and we still couldn't keep the house. Keanu stayed silent, listening with the respect of someone who knew that the story didn't need fixing, it just needed to be heard. There were nights I held his hand while he shook from the chemo, and Maya had to sleep in a hallway because we shared a room in a shelter, and still, he'd smile at her, like she was his sunrise. She turned to him. Her eyes were dry but red. When he died, I swore I'd never let anyone carry us again. I thought if I worked hard enough, I could protect her from ever feeling that powerless again. Keanu stood. His movements were slow, deliberate. You've done more than protect her. You've raised a young woman with purpose. Alana shook her head. Purpose doesn't pay for solar kits or entry fees. No, he said, but maybe community does. Quietly, without strings, without expectations. She flinched. You mean charity? He smiled gently. I mean alignment. I know people who believe in the same things you do. Let them come to the table, not with money, but with shared mission. Let it be anonymous. Let it be real. Alana hesitated. And if I say no, then I'll keep showing up, sitting in that booth, ordering bitter coffee, watching Maya fry eggs and build circuits. And I'll cheer from the sidelines. A long pause followed. She looked at him, really looked this time, not as the man who walked away years ago, but as the one who had returned, with no demands, no apologies, just presence. And finally she said the words neither of them had dared to speak. I never stopped loving the way you listened. Keanu's throat tightened, but he said nothing. She walked past him toward the kitchen, whispering, Just no, big gestures, not yet. I hear you, he said. The wall hadn't fallen, but a door had opened. The morning after their quiet exchange, Keanu stepped out into the misty light just before sunrise. The sidewalk still glistened from a light rain, and the street lamps hadn't yet shut off. He pulled his coat tighter and walked toward the corner near the bus stop, where an old payphone still stood. The receiver was worn, the cord coiled and weathered. He slipped a few coins in and dialed the number from a card he'd saved long ago, one he hadn't used since the days he funded smaller advocacy projects under different names. The phone rang 3 times before a woman picked up. Her voice was calm, practiced. Good morning, Patient Equity Network. How may I direct your call? Keanu kept his tone low. Hi, I'm looking for someone who works with medical billing audits, especially for cases involving long-term treatment and excessive penalties. There was a pause. We do have a pro bono outreach team. May I ask if you're calling on behalf of a patient? Not directly. I'm calling as someone who believes they might benefit from a broader workshop. If your team holds enrollment info sessions, maybe there's a way to bring one to a diner, a small town in Oregon. They wouldn't know it's for them specifically. Discreet outreach? Yes, exactly. The woman on the other end softened. We have something called Health Literacy Week coming up. We host pop-up events. Billing explanations, surprise bill disputes, repayment plans, open Q&A. We'd need a local contact to coordinate. I'll arrange the space and provide refreshments. You won't need to mention me. He gave her the name of the diner, the time when it would be least disruptive, and the name of the waitress he hoped would benefit, without framing her as a charity case. Understood, the woman replied. We'll reach out to the manager. Should we mention your name at all? No, Keanu said firmly. Let the information speak for itself. He hung up with a sense of quiet resolve, then walked back inside the diner just as the cook arrived for the early prep shift. Keanu offered a brief nod, picked the corner booth farthest from the window, and pulled out a laptop wrapped in an old brown case. He didn't want to send money. He wanted to seed opportunity, starting with something that looked like a public service, because that's what it truly was. Keanu powered up the laptop and connected to the diner's weak but reliable Wi-Fi. The corner booth stayed quiet, just the low hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the clink of prep knives against cutting boards in the back. He sipped from a chipped mug of reheated coffee, more bitter than bold, and opened a browser window to start the second part of his plan. He typed, "Legal clinic, surprise medical billing, Oregon." A list of small organizations appeared, names he remembered from his past philanthropic work, some folded since the pandemic, but a few still running on threadbare teams and unpaid interns. He clicked on one based out of Eugene that handled debt reconciliation and billing disputes with hospitals. A contact form popped up. He filled it in, line by line, keeping his message simple. "Hello. I'm writing regarding a family that may qualify for your help. Widowed teacher. Leukemia bills. No direct intervention needed, just suggesting a casual way for her to learn what's possible without shame. If you host information tables or offer free consultations during community events, there's a diner that would gladly host." He added the address and Millie's name as the point of contact, knowing she'd understand how to make it feel natural. He didn't ask for a call back. He signed the message under a pseudonym he'd used before, Miles G. It wasn't about hiding. It was about removing himself from the center of the story. If Alana was ever going to accept help, it had to come from the world itself, not from him walking back into her life like some long-lost savior. That would only deepen the distance. No, this had to feel like chance. Like grace disguised as coincidence. He leaned back, eyes closed for a breath, then opened another tab and searched for Central Oregon Youth Science Projects. At the top of the results was a state fair submission page, entry deadline in 2 weeks. Maya had mentioned it without realizing the timeline was so tight. He scanned the requirements: schematic, materials list, brief essay, video walkthrough. The materials list alone was daunting. Conductive filament, microinverter panels, a cheap but efficient charge controller. Her math was sharp, but the budget she'd written in the margins of her notebook was even sharper. Every component was accounted for in price and weight. There was no margin for error, no luxury for backup parts. She'd planned the entire kit like someone used to stretching every cent. He clicked over to the website of a small community center he'd once supported in Bend, Oregon. They had a page called Teach to Earn Kits, a quiet program he had funded years ago that let older students earn science supplies by teaching weekend classes to younger kids. The program had faded during the pandemic, but the page was still live. Keanu opened his email and wrote directly to the director he remembered. "Hi, it's been a while. If the Teach to Earn kits are still in storage or if the program's paused, I'd be happy to restart it. We could pilot it in a town nearby. One student I met would thrive with that kind of model. Let me know the cost and I'll cover it under the same donation method as before. Quietly, no press." He hit send. Then he sat back again and stared out the window at the quiet street, already feeling the slow turning of invisible gears. The street outside had barely stirred when his inbox chimed with a reply. The message from the director of the Bend Community Center was short but warm. The kits were still there, sealed in storage. The staff had been hoping to revive the program once funding returned. Keanu's message wasn't just timely. It was the spark they'd needed. "We can have the supplies delivered by next week. If you're covering the cost, we'll relaunch quietly. No mention of donors unless requested. Just tell us the student's name and town, and we'll handle the rest with care." Keanu smiled faintly, typing back that the student's name was Maya Brooks. He gave the diner's address but left out any family details. He asked that they introduce the kid through a weekend junior mentor program to avoid singling her out. That way, Maya could feel like she'd earned the materials by helping others, not receiving pity. He closed the laptop gently, as if not to disturb the balance of things. Outside, the sky was shifting, peach and gold soaking through gray. It was almost opening time again. The town was waking up. Before standing, he took a napkin and wrote something in small, neat letters. A formula. Maya's solar panel voltage calculation, reworked more efficiently, using one fewer diode and cutting total cost by $14.76. He folded the napkin and slipped it under her backpack, which still leaned near the booth where she'd eaten that morning. She would find it when she'd packed up later, and she'd know someone had noticed her effort. But it wouldn't feel intrusive, just a quiet nudge forward. Walking to the counter, he handed Millie a 20 for coffee and leaned close, voice low. "I might not be around every day, but if a workshop or opportunity shows up, don't tell her I had anything to do with it." Millie looked at him, then nodded with a small smile. "You've got a way of making things land soft, Keanu. I'll make sure it stays that way." He stepped out into the light, not waiting for thanks. The help was already in motion. Legal clinics, community centers, programs designed not to spotlight struggle, but to make strength visible. And all of it would unfold in a way that let Alana and Maya hold their heads high. No headlines, no credit, just a path quietly cleared. The diner windows were fogged slightly from the warmth of coffee pots and the quiet buzz of anticipation inside. Outside, taped to the glass door, a hand-lettered sign read in cheerful blue ink, "Solar Saturday, free, all ages welcome." Inside, 3 folding tables had been pushed together and covered with butcher paper and bits of wiring, LED lights, batteries, and tiny solar panels no bigger than a coaster. Maya stood behind the tables in an oversized hoodie, her sleeves rolled up, a lanyard around her neck that read "Mentor" in hand-drawn block letters. On either side of her stood 2 elderly gentlemen from the local senior center, Mr. Hanley and Mr. Ortiz, both retired engineers who had agreed to volunteer. Maya was showing a boy no older than 7 how to solder 2 wires together without overheating the board. Her voice was calm, precise, and confident. "You want to hold the wire like this, see? And tap the solder just long enough to melt, not drip." The boy's face lit up when the LED blinked red. Mr. Hanley chuckled. "She teaches better than I did at Boeing." At the back of the diner, near the kitchen, Alana stood quietly, arms folded, eyes fixed on her daughter. She wasn't in uniform today. She had come downstairs in jeans and a flannel, her expression equal parts pride and disbelief. Every now and then she glanced toward the entrance, as if waiting for someone to come in and tell her it was all a misunderstanding, but no one did. The room was real. The children were smiling. The lights were blinking. Millie moved behind the counter, refilling coffee for parents and chatting about the weather. No one mentioned who had organized the event. There were no banners, no foundations listed, no sponsors printed on the tables. It felt like a community effort, homegrown and quiet. Near the entrance, Keanu sat at a side booth with a paper cup in hand. He watched from afar, not intruding. When a man with a press badge from the local paper came in, he quietly stood up and slipped behind the kitchen door. He didn't want his face to become the story. The reporter leaned over to ask Millie about the workshop. She shrugged like it was no big deal. "Kids wanted to teach something. Town showed up. That's all." Back at the work table, Maya guided a girl in pigtails as she assembled a basic solar charging circuit for a flashlight. The girl squinted as she read the directions, and Maya leaned in gently. "Try flipping the diode. Electricity only flows one way. It's kind of like trust." The girl grinned and made the change. The light flicked on. Alana turned away for a moment, swallowing hard. Alana stepped further into the diner, weaving around chairs and tables until she stood just behind the last row of kids. She didn't speak, didn't interrupt. She just watched. Mr. Ortiz tapped Maya's shoulder and nodded toward a teenage boy who was nervously fumbling with his solar array. Maya gave a small nod and crouched beside the boy. She didn't take over. She asked questions. "What's the first thing we should check? Can you trace the current path with your finger?" The boy nodded slowly and pointed. Maya waited. When he reached the junction and hesitated, she smiled. "That's where it breaks. What do you think happens when current hits a dead end?" He thought for a second. "It stops?" "Exactly." The boy reconnected the wires, and when the circuit lit up, he sat back with wide eyes. "Whoa, I did that?" Maya grinned. You did that." Applause broke out from a couple of parents standing nearby. It wasn't loud or staged, just a ripple of genuine pride and surprise, the kind of sound that fills a room when a kid discovers what they're capable of. From the kitchen doorway, Keanu peeked out and saw Alana. Her shoulders had dropped slightly, tension replaced by something quieter. Almost reverence. Her fingers tightened around the ceramic mug she held, but her lips curled into the faintest smile. The newspaper photographer raised a camera. Keanu quickly turned back, stepped away, and busied himself drying cups at the back sink. No photos. No credit. Out on the floor, the projects continued. One girl proudly held up a tiny solar-powered fan that whirred softly. A father in a wheelchair gave his daughter a high five as her LED bracelet blinked red, green, blue. At the far corner of the table, Maya pulled out her own project. A scaled-down version of her senior design. A modular solar kit with instructions in both English and Spanish. It was meant for homes with elderly or disabled residents, especially those on fixed incomes during cold Oregon winters. Her kit came with basic thermal sensors and could power a low-wattage heater in emergencies. One of the younger students asked, "Will this go to the science fair?" Maya hesitated, looked at her mom, then shook her head. "We're still working on some parts." The boy looked disappointed. "It's better than mine." Maya gave a modest shrug. "Yours lights up a dream catcher, though. That's pretty cool." From the edge of the room, a woman from the community center, invited weeks earlier by an anonymous donor, stepped forward with a clipboard and smiled at Alana. "We'll be hosting another event like this next Saturday if you'd like to make it a regular thing. No pressure." Alana blinked, still processing. The woman added gently, "No strings attached. The space is already funded." Alana glanced toward Maya, then the tables, then finally nodded. "Okay." Maya looked up in surprise. "Really?" Alana's voice caught. "If you're up for it." Maya turned back to the kids with a full smile. A few minutes later, as parents helped clean up and fold the tables, one child stepped forward shyly and said, "Miss Maya, are you a real teacher?" Maya paused, looked over at her mom, and then back to the little girl. "Not yet," she said softly, "but maybe someday." Keanu stood quietly in the back, watching the pieces settle into place. And now we ask you, what teacher changed your life? Drop their first name in the comments to honor them. The last customer had long since left. Chairs were flipped onto tables, the griddle scrubbed clean. Outside, the rain had finally softened into a whisper against the windows, leaving behind that thick, damp quiet that only comes after a long storm. Alana sat in the corner booth, elbows on the table, hands wrapped around a chipped blue mug. She hadn't touched the tea inside. It had long gone cold. Across from her, Keanu sat in silence, his expression open but unintrusive. No expectations, just presence. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft buzz of the diner's old refrigerator, humming in the back, and the occasional creak from the pipes overhead. Then, gently, Alana drew in a breath. Her voice was so soft it barely stirred the air. It wasn't just the fight, you know. Keanu didn't react, didn't shift. He simply waited. Alana's eyes stayed fixed on the mug. "Back then, the night I left, we were screaming. I can still hear it. Words I wish I could pull back into my mouth. But that's not why I left." Keanu's hands were folded on the table, still, quiet, listening. She swallowed. "I was late. Couple weeks. Thought it was stress. Or maybe just the diner hours messing with me. But then I took a test. It was positive." Keanu's eyes softened. He didn't move. "I didn't tell you," she said, and her voice cracked. "I wanted to. I kept playing it out in my head, but then I started bleeding. 2 weeks later, Keanu finally blinked, once. His hands stayed where they were. He didn't reach for her, didn't try to fix it. Just let her speak. "I was alone," Alana said. "I called in sick to work, said it was the flu. sat in the bathroom for hours, then curled up on the floor and stayed there until morning. I didn't want anyone to see me, not even you." Her throat closed for a moment. Then she pushed forward. I felt ashamed, like my body had failed, like I had no right to grieve something I hadn't even told you about yet. I thought maybe it was punishment for how we'd been treating each other, for not knowing how to ask for help. Keanu exhaled slowly, the kind of breath meant to hold steady in the face of someone else's pain. Alana's eyes lifted for the first time. "I buried it so deep, Keanu, even from myself. I told myself it was better that way, that it was over before it even began. But I never stopped thinking about who they might have." Keanu didn't look away. "You don't have to justify your grief." She shook her head. "I know, I just needed someone to know, really know. I'm here now," he said quietly, and he meant it in the only way that mattered. Not as a fix, not as a bomb, but as a witness. She looked away, blinking fast. "You would have been a good father." His voice didn't tremble, but it landed like a stone placed carefully on the riverbed. "So, would you have been a good mother?" The silence that followed wasn't empty. It held something sacred. Alana pressed the side of her hand to her cheek, swiping away a tear. "I think about them sometimes, just in flashes. A hand, a laugh. I don't even know if they'd have had your eyes or mine." Keanu's hand moved just slightly, not touching hers, but close enough to feel warmth. "Then we carry those flashes. That's all we can do." The grief didn't vanish. It didn't resolve. But something loosened in the air, like a knot that had lived too long in a quiet corner of her chest had finally begun to unwind. Alana leaned back against the booth, her body sinking deeper into the vinyl seat, as if all the strength she had used to carry this secret was finally letting go. Her gaze drifted toward the diner window, where the rain had stopped completely. The night outside was still wet, but calm, almost forgiving. "I never named them," she murmured. "Didn't know if that would make it better or worse." Keanu's voice was low, but certain. "Then maybe we name what they gave us instead. Grace, courage, change." Alana's lip trembled, and she gave a broken smile. "You still talk like you write in notebooks no one's allowed to see." He smiled, too, just slightly. "Sometimes. It's safer that way." A small laugh escaped her, quiet and raw. "You know, I hated you for a while." "I know," he said. "Not because you left," she continued, "but because I thought you were the only one who could afford to." Keanu's eyes didn't leave hers. "You were wrong. He knows," she whispered. The clock ticked overhead. The sound of Maya's distant laughter floated down from the apartment above, followed by the soft thud of her climbing into bed. The moment held. Alana turned toward him, voice steady now. "I didn't need saving, Keanu, but I did need space to fall apart. I just didn't think I deserved it." "You did," he said. "You still do." They sat there a while longer, neither needing to fill the space with more words. What had broken them years ago was still real, still part of their story, but it no longer defined the present. And in that small, quiet hour, with no one watching and no one asking for a perfect ending, something more important happened. They grieved, together, and in doing so they began to forgive, not just each other, but themselves. A single streetlight flickered outside. Alana stood slowly, reaching for the teapot that had long gone cold. "Want to warm up?" she asked, half a smile tugging at her mouth. Keanu nodded, rising to help her. They moved around each other like people who'd once been something more. Not lovers now, not yet, but something repaired, something honest, something that mattered again. The afternoon sunlight slid through the front window of the diner, casting slow-moving shadows across the laminate counter. The bell above the door jangled softly as Maya darted outside to chase a napkin caught in the breeze. Alana stood behind the register, her hands still damp from dishwater, flipping absently through the stack of mail the postman had dropped off an hour earlier. Junk flyers, coupon booklets, utility notice, then something thicker. 2 large envelopes with official seals and plastic windows. One was addressed to Residents of the Silver Diner. The other had her name typed out neatly in the center. Her thumb hovered at the edge of the envelope. A tight knot pulled in her stomach. She thought about setting it aside, ignoring it. But something about the calm of the afternoon, the smell of fresh coffee lingering in the air, and the low hum of Keanu sweeping in the corner gave her the nerve to open it. Inside was a folded flyer. Open Enrollment Community Support Workshop, Healthcare Literacy and Billing Disputes. It listed several sessions at the community hall across the street. Topics included navigating billing codes, spotting insurance overcharges, and how to request a line limit audit. All sessions were free. A note at the bottom read, "Sponsored by Oregon Health Partners and the People's Legal Advocacy Clinic." Alana frowned, recognizing one of the clinic names. She had seen it mentioned on a bulletin board once, but never thought it had anything to do with her. She reached for the second envelope. This one was different. Inside was a letter addressed directly to her, referencing her hospital case from last year. It said her records had been included, anonymously, in a sample review program prompted by a non-profit review board. The clinic was offering to go over her case, free of charge, as part of the broader community support effort. The phrasing was careful, respectful. It didn't say she'd been flagged or singled out. In fact, a footnote explained that dozens of local residents had been mailed similar invitations. Her heart thudded. It still felt personal, but in a good way, like someone had left the door open just enough for her to walk through with her head held high. She didn't speak for a moment, just breathed in, then again. It felt like oxygen returning after a deep underwater silence. Keanu noticed. He stepped behind the counter, glanced at the letter, then at her face. "Everything okay?" he asked. Alana nodded slowly. "I think, maybe." She didn't explain yet. She just held up the mail and leaned back against the wall, her body still catching up to the emotional shift. She had spent over a year feeling like a prisoner to paperwork she didn't understand, medical terms that sounded like foreign languages, billing codes that didn't match her memory of the treatment. Every month she made a choice between rent and the minimum payment on bills that never shrank. And now, without begging or breaking, someone had handed her a map. Not a solution, at least not yet, but a direction. Later that week, Alana walked into the community hall for the workshop. She sat in the second row, notebook in hand, flanked by 2 older women she recognized from the diner. No one looked at her sideways. No one asked why she was there. The instructor at the front, an energetic woman with a laptop and a giant whiteboard, treated every question with patience. When Alana raised her hand, it didn't feel like a risk. It felt like a choice. By the end of the session, she had filled 6 pages of notes. When she handed in her file for review, the clinic volunteer, a retired insurance analyst named Jerry, smiled kindly and said, "We'll take a look. No promises, but a lot of these cases have some curious numbers." Alana left the building feeling like something had shifted inside her. Not dramatically, just enough to stand straighter. 2 days later, she got the call. Alana had just finished rolling silverware at the back table when her phone buzzed. It was a number she didn't recognize. Aria, code local, but the rest unfamiliar. She hesitated, then answered. A warm voice greeted her. It was Jerry, the retired insurance analyst from the workshop. He spoke gently but clearly. "We've reviewed your file, Alana. There's quite a bit we can work with." She froze. "What does that mean, exactly?" "Well," Jerry continued, "about 60% of your total charges appear to be either miscoded or unsupported by documentation. That doesn't mean they'll be erased immediately, but it gives us a solid basis to challenge them. We'll draft a formal dispute letter and submit it to the hospital and insurance provider. You won't need to do that part alone." Alana didn't realize her hand was gripping the phone tight against her cheek. 60%? She repeated. "Could go higher," Jerry added, "but we like to start modest and build." She thanked him, her voice trembling but steady enough to mean it. When the call ended, she stayed there, motionless, silverware half-wrapped, heart sprinting. She looked up toward the kitchen window, where steam curled from the coffee machine and sunlight caught on the metal racks. Keanu was wiping down a table near the entrance. She walked over quietly, still holding her phone like it might dissolve if she let go. "They're helping," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. 60% of it might be gone." Keanu didn't cheer. He didn't gasp or grab her shoulders. Instead, he nodded, slow and soft, as if that truth needed to land gently. Then he picked up the rag and walked back behind the counter. Without saying a word, he started the coffee machine. Alana chuckled through the tears she hadn't noticed forming. "You're celebrating with coffee?" He shrugged, grinning now. "It's what we do here." She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. Then she grabbed a dishcloth and started wiping the booth next to him. In that quiet act, coffee brewing, booths cleaned, lives quietly mending, there was more celebration than any party could have offered. Millie sat at her desk, glasses perched low on her nose, peering at a hand-drawn ledger that had seen better days. The numbers were honest, if unforgiving. Rent due in 10 days, utility margins rising, staff hours barely holding, and the back fridge still on its last breath. She let out a breath and rubbed her forehead, then glanced up as the office door creaked open. Keanu stood there, casual as always, coffee in hand. He didn't need to knock anymore. He leaned in just enough to smile. "Got a minute?" Millie gestured toward the chair opposite her, curious. "Always for you, sugar. What's on your mind?" He set down the cup, not his, but hers. Sweet hot, 2 creams, no sugar. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded paper. It wasn't an invoice or receipt. It was a plan. "I've been thinking," he said, tapping the edge of the desk. "This place already does more for the neighborhood than most nonprofits. What if we leaned into that, made it something bigger, but still quiet?" Millie arched a brow. "Go on." He unfolded the paper. "First Sunday of every month, neighborhood breakfast. Pancakes, eggs, the works. No prices, just pay what you can. Every dollar raised goes toward 2 things. First, increasing staff hours. You've got folks like Alana who need more shifts. Second, a rotating student fund. Could be for supplies, small repairs, project kits, whatever keeps them building and showing up." Millie leaned forward, interest peaked. "And who's covering the initial cost?" Keanu smiled without blinking. "Let's just say it's already covered." Her lips pressed together, half smirking. "You mean you?" He shrugged. "Anonymous donor. Always better that way." Millie sat back, eyes on him. "You're serious?" "Completely," he said. "No speeches, no headlines, just a full belly, a full heart, and a diner that stays alive while lifting others quietly." She looked back at her messy ledger, then at the coffee he brought. The silence stretched, but not with doubt. It stretched like something sacred was unfolding. "You know," she finally said, "there's dignity in letting people give, even when they've got little." "That's the point," Keanu said softly. "Everyone gives. Some with time, some with coins, some with trust." Millie nodded. "Then let's give it a name worth remembering." Flyers went up by Wednesday, not glossy or mass-printed, just thick paper with hand-drawn borders and stamped letters. "Neighborhood breakfast. First Sunday, 9 a.m. Pay what you can." A small note at the bottom read, "Sponsored in quiet by those who care." Millie posted one on the front window of the diner, another at the laundromat, and Keanu stuck one inside the community center's glassboard during a quiet errand run. Word moved faster than expected. By Saturday, Maya had already counted 3 different teachers who asked her if she'd be attending. She smiled and said, "I'll be behind the counter this time." Alana noticed the energy shift almost immediately. Regulars started tossing a little extra into the jar. One elderly couple who usually split toast and coffee suddenly asked for omelets, then left a 20 with a wink. A construction worker donated a box of pancake mix. Keanu said nothing, just nodded when he saw the supplies arrive. Sunday morning came. The kitchen turned on before dawn. Millie wore her special apron with the stitched tulips, while Maya handled the prep station beside Alana. Keanu took the sink. By 9:00 IEM, a line had formed outside. Families, retirees, teens from the high school, even a few people Keanu recognized from the workshop mailing list. There were no registers that morning, no receipts, just donation jars made from old mason containers and a chalkboard at the front that read, "Whatever you give, give with heart." The first crowd was hesitant. People looked around, unsure. But when Millie stepped out with plates piled high and simply said, "Sit, eat, smile," everything softened. Keanu moved like a ghost in the background, bussing tables, carrying pitchers, fetching napkins. He never stopped, but never stood in the center either. He made sure the elders had cushions, the kids had crayons, and the servers stayed hydrated. When the brunch rush reached its peak, Maya handed a hot plate across the counter, laughing with a younger boy from the solar workshop. She didn't see Alana watching from the back booth, watching with pride that trembled under the weight of relief. By noon, the jars were full. Quiet clinks echoed every time someone gave. Some dropped folded bills, some coins. One little girl gave a shiny marble and a crumpled thank you note. No one was turned away. After the final pancake flipped and the last plate cleared, Millie locked the door and looked at the team. Everyone was flushed, tired, but light somehow, as if something sacred had passed through. She held up the tip jar like it was treasure. "We raised just over 400 today." Alana's eyes widened. "You're kidding." Millie grinned. "And every penny's going where it matters." She turned to Maya and handed her a small envelope. "You earned these project parts, right?" Maya opened the envelope to find a note. For building, for dreaming, for teaching. Inside was $280, 0 cents in bills. Her hand shook. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep showing up," Millie whispered. "That's more than enough." Maya nodded quickly, her voice caught somewhere between gratitude and awe. Alana stepped behind her daughter, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. She didn't speak either. The tears said everything. Keanu moved toward the sink again, like always, but Millie caught his arm before he could disappear. "You don't get to vanish today," she said gently. "Just this once. Take the seat. Let us feed you." He smiled but hesitated. Millie didn't flinch. "You gave us room to rise. That matters." So Keanu sat, just for 10 minutes. He drank a hot cup of diner coffee and let them serve him a plate stacked high. He didn't ask how much they made or where it would go. He already knew. And as the light shifted across the scuffed tile floor, as Maya carefully tucked her envelope into her backpack, as Alana wiped her hands with the cloth and looked out at the empty tables with something like hope, Keanu closed his eyes for a moment. This wasn't a rescue. This was restoration. Not charity, but dignity, multiplied. The lull before the evening rush settled over the diner like a warm blanket. Pans were scrubbed, counters wiped, and coffee brewed in quiet cycles. Alana leaned against the pass-through window with her arms crossed, chatting softly with Millie about inventory. Outside, the wind picked up again, a reminder that spring in Bend was always a little unpredictable. Then the front door slammed open. Maya burst in, breathless, holding a thick envelope high in the air like a torch. Her backpack slipped off one shoulder, but she didn't stop moving. "Mom!" Alana spun around, startled. "Maya, what?" "It's here!" Maya exclaimed, eyes wide with disbelief and adrenaline. "The letter! From MIT." Millie turned from the sink, her hands dripping with soap. "What letter?" "The Engineering Academy," Maya shouted, still panting. "The summer program I applied for. The one in Cambridge." Alana's heart began to hammer. She walked toward Maya slowly, unsure if she should brace herself for good news or comfort. Maya handed over the envelope, her fingers trembling. It was heavy, sealed with a university crest. Alana stared at it, her own breath now shaky. "Did you open it?" "I wanted to do it with you." Keanu had stepped out from the kitchen just in time to catch the last few words. He stayed back near the doorway, watching. Alana nodded and carefully peeled the envelope open. Inside was a navy folder, a letterhead in crisp font, and a bright gold sticker on the top corner. She read the first line out loud. "Dear Maya, we are thrilled to offer you admission to the MIT Summer Engineering Academy." The room held its breath. Alana clapped a hand over her mouth. Maya shrieked. Millie let out a cheer and dropped her towel, then rushed over to pull them both into a soapy, excited hug. Even Keanu's face broke into a proud, quiet grin. "Full, need-based aid pending documentation," Alana whispered as she skimmed the rest. "They're offering everything." Maya was already on the verge of tears. "It says housing, meals, even a laptop loan for the summer. I can't believe this is real." Millie grabbed Maya's shoulders. "You earned this. Every late night, every weekend workshop. This is your moment." But as the celebration buzzed around her, Alana's smile faltered just slightly. She glanced again at the envelope and saw the checklist on the back page. Documents needed for final approval. Forms. Travel deposit deadlines. Proof of income. Deadlines, deposits, paperwork. Joy bloomed in her chest, but fear crept in behind it. Alana folded the acceptance letter slowly, her fingers pressing the crease tighter than necessary. The glow in Maya's eyes dimmed slightly as she noticed her mother's expression shift. "What's wrong?" Maya asked, voice barely above a whisper. Alana tried to force a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Nothing, baby. It's just... there's a lot to figure out." Maya looked at the papers again, catching the words deadline and travel confirmation in bold. "Is it about the travel? Or the documents?" Alana nodded, her hand now resting on the counter for balance. "I need to verify income, and there's a $200 0-cent refundable deposit for the flight if the aid doesn't clear in time." She glanced at Millie, then quickly added, "It's not impossible, just tight." Millie didn't hesitate. She crossed the kitchen, reached into a drawer under the register, and pulled out a thick envelope of her own. "You're not paying for that flight." Alana blinked, stunned. "Millie, I can't." "You're not. You're applying to the Bend Youth Opportunity Voucher Program. It's for kids who get into national programs, just like Maya. Travel, housing gaps, meals. It's all covered." Maya's eyes widened. "That exists?" Millie handed her the application. "Local businesses donate. Restaurants, barbershops, even a tire shop down the block. Everyone contributes. It's like Ben's way of sending our kids to the moon." Alana laughed softly, but it was shaky. "But how did they know?" Millie tilted her head toward the corner booth where Keanu was quietly filling napkin dispensers. "Somebody sent a donation early this month, covered 2 full scholarships. They didn't leave a name, just a note that said, 'For the ones with fire in their hands.'" Alana's mouth fell open. She didn't say anything. She just looked at Keanu. He met her gaze, then turned back to his task without a word. Maya clutched the folder to her chest. "So, I can go?" Millie smiled. You can go. Maya lunged at Alana, wrapping her arms around her mother's waist. You said we were stuck. You said it was too late. But it's not. It's not too late. Alana held her close. Her voice was thick now. No, baby, it's not too late. Keanu stepped into the back kitchen, giving them space. But as he passed the open door, Maya called out. Wait. He stopped. I want you to be the one who drops me off at the airport. Alana looked startled, but said nothing. I mean it, Maya said. You didn't have to come back, but you did, and I want you there when I go. Keanu's throat tightened, but he nodded. Then I will be. Silence followed for a moment. Warm, charged, real. Millie broke it with a chuckle. Well, I guess I'd better start organizing another cake. We've got a future MIT student in the house. Maya laughed through her tears. Can it be chocolate this time? Only if you promise to bring us back a souvenir, Millie teased. Alana leaned against the counter, finally allowing the weight of relief to settle into her bones. Keanu caught her eye again, and this time, she didn't look away. That night, after the diner closed, Alana stood outside beneath the porch light. Keanu joined her, hands tucked into his jacket. Did you really start that fund? She asked. He nodded once. I just wanted to make sure no kid missed their chance because of something as small as a zip code. She looked at him, voice soft. It wasn't small to us. Keanu smiled faintly. It never is. Inside, Maya packed a small suitcase with more hope than fear. Outside, the air smelled like clean pavement and possibilities. Tomorrow, a new chapter would begin. For all of them. The multi-purpose room at the Bend Community Center hummed with soft chatter and the clinking of coffee cups. Folding chairs filled the space, arranged in neat rows, facing a long table with a colorful banner stretched across it. PTA Night. Energy, Equity, and Education. The walls had been decorated by local students, hand-drawn posters of wind turbines, solar panels, and circuit diagrams in bright marker strokes. At the front of the room, Maya adjusted the display on her table one last time. A neat trifold board stood proudly behind her, outlining her project, titled Solar You Can Carry, a modular kit for real homes. Alana stood just off to the side, her hands clasped together, heart pounding. It was Maya's night, and she didn't want to cast a shadow, but every breath she took came laced with awe. Her daughter, barely 16, was standing in front of a room full of adults, many of them tired, overworked, and skeptical, and speaking with calm confidence. Good evening, Maya said into the portable mic. My name is Maya, and I'm a sophomore at Jefferson High. I used to think science belonged only in textbooks, but I've learned that the best science happens when people use what they know to make someone's life easier. She reached into a canvas bag and pulled out a rectangular device no bigger than a shoebox. With a soft click, she opened it like a briefcase. Inside were coiled wires, a small foldable solar panel, LED bulbs, a USB charging port, and a laminated instruction sheet. This kit can power a lamp, a phone, or a fan. I designed it with my workshop mentors, and we've made 5 prototypes using recycled materials. The idea is simple. Teenagers like me can build and donate these to local families with help from senior volunteers. That way, we learn and give back at the same time. She looked up, her voice clear but vulnerable. I didn't think I'd be the kind of person who could invent something, but sometimes someone gives you a little space to try, and you surprise yourself. A ripple of quiet emotion moved through the room. Keanu, seated in the last row, leaned forward slightly. He hadn't breathed since she started speaking. Maya wasn't just presenting a project, she was offering a blueprint for something bigger, something communal. The applause was gentle at first, but it grew with each second. Hands clapping from parents, seniors, teachers, and even the janitor leaning against the exit door. Maya smiled nervously, then bowed her head in a small, grateful nod. It wasn't just about her kit. It was about being seen. At the edge of the display table, a sign-up sheet rested next to a plate of cookies. 4 seniors had already put their names down to help assemble future kits. One even added a note, "Can teach soldering." And a mother from across the street scribbled her address and circled, "Interested in free install." Alana took a half step forward to offer quiet support, but Maya turned and motioned her closer. "I want to thank my mom," Maya said, turning back to the mic, eyes finding Alana's. "When everything felt like it was falling apart, she gave me permission to believe in the future again, even when she wasn't sure herself. She came to every workshop. She learned right alongside me, and," her voice caught for just a breath, "she reminded me that it's okay to rebuild." Alana blinked hard, her throat tightened. She hadn't expected this, not publicly. A few parents wiped at their eyes. One of the seniors who had helped with the soldering looked down at his lap, his own memory stirred. As the event wound down, a local reporter from the Bend Bulletin approached Maya's table. She had been scribbling notes since the presentation started, her recorder quietly capturing every word. She extended a hand toward Maya first, then to Alana. "Do you mind if I run a piece on tonight? The angle is community innovation, and honestly, this was one of the most impressive student-led efforts I've seen in a while." Alana hesitated, glancing toward the back of the room, but Keanu was gone, the seat he had occupied. Quietly, anonymously, was empty. She exhaled through her nose, then nodded. "I'm just her mom," Alana said with a smile. The reporter shook her head gently. "Exactly. That's what makes it powerful." The next morning, the online edition of the paper published the story. The headline read, "Mother and Daughter Rebuild Futures, One Solar Panel at a Time." There was no mention of the man who'd quietly loaded folding chairs into a closet, or the one who refilled the water pitchers before slipping away. The story was about Alana's resilience and Maya's brilliance. Exactly how it should be. Maya clipped the article from the paper that weekend and pinned it to the corkboard in the cafe kitchen. Above it, she wrote in bold marker, "This is what hope looks like." Alana found it during prep the next morning, standing still for a long moment in front of it. She didn't say anything, just touched the edge of the page, as if confirming it was real. A part of her had always feared she'd live in the shadow of what she had lost. But now, somehow, through quiet hours, soldered wires, and second chances, her story had a new chapter. Millie peeked around the corner, flour dusting her arms. "You two just might change this whole town." Alana gave a soft laugh. "We're just trying to keep the lights on." Millie winked. That's usually how revolutions start. Later that evening, long after the rush, Keanu returned through the back door. He didn't mention the article. He didn't need to. He found the broom and swept the floor like always. But before he left, Maya caught him in the hallway. "I saw what you did," she whispered, her eyes shining. He tilted his head. "You helped without asking for credit. You stayed when things were quiet. That matters more than anyone knows." Keanu looked at her with a gentle nod. "That's what your mom taught me." And with that, he stepped out into the night. No headlines, no fanfare, just footprints in the dark, walking beside the lives he had helped steady. The light in the cafe stayed on a little longer that night, not because of wattage or wiring, but because something deeper had been restored. Recognition, yes, but for the right person, and that made all the difference. The river trail was quiet, save for the slow drip of water falling from the fir trees, remnants of the afternoon rain. A soft hush lingered over the path as Keanu and Alana walked side by side. The golden-pink tint of dusk cast long shadows across the moss-covered rocks, and the distant sound of water sliding over stones brought a peaceful rhythm to the evening. Alana hugged her jacket tighter as a breeze stirred. She had suggested the walk, needing space away from the diner, from the spreadsheets, from the weight of the last few weeks. But the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. After a long stretch of quiet steps, Alana finally spoke, her voice low but steady. "What if all this collapses when you leave?" Keanu glanced at her, but didn't answer right away. He didn't rush to soothe her. He let the question breathe, let her finish it if she needed to. Lana's eyes were fixed on the path, her expression unreadable. I mean, the workshops, the voucher program, the Sunday breakfasts. Maya's momentum. Even me, standing in front of kids again. I feel like it's all held together by you just being here. Keanu's steps slowed until they came to a small overlook by the river. He rested a hand gently against the wood railing and waited for her to meet his eyes. "It's not," he said quietly. Alana searched his face. Keanu pointed, not with his finger but with his gaze, toward the trees, the town beyond them, and the systems quietly moving forward behind the scenes. "I've stepped back on purpose. The clinic outreach isn't in my name. The community center runs the donor calendar now. The tip jars? They belong to the diner, and Maya's supply vouchers are handled through the education fund, not through me." He looked at her fully, steady and clear. "This place didn't change because I showed up. It changed because people, starting with you, said yes when it mattered. You picked up a marker and wrote Solar Saturday on a sign. You gave your kid room to teach. You held this town in your hands long before I came back." Alana's eyes glistened. He let that sink in. "I know the worry," he said, voice softer now. "It's easy to think everything good is fragile, that it only lasts as long as someone is holding it up." She nodded slowly. "But the good things we build, right? Quietly, with intention, they stand on their own. They're not loud, but they last." Alana exhaled, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. They resumed walking. The trail curved down to the water, where the river opened into a wide bend. Keanu paused and turned to her again. "I want to ask you something." Alana stopped. Her breath caught. Something in his voice shifted, gentle, but weighted. "This isn't about me deciding, it's about your permission." She tilted her head slightly, cautious but curious. "Okay, I'd like to do one more thing," he said, "with your full consent. Nothing public, just something that honors what you've built. And I won't do it unless you say yes." Alana's brow furrowed gently. She wasn't sure what he meant, but something in his tone, the way he didn't press, didn't assume, made her feel safe. She gave a small nod. "Okay, what is it?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He looked out at the river, watching the dusk settle over the current. Then he turned to face her fully, hands relaxed by his sides, eyes steady. "There's a community grant program through a private foundation I've worked with before," he began. "They support quiet leaders, people who build things without asking for attention." Alana tilted her head. "And I want to nominate you." Her breath hitched. He continued, calm and sincere. "No cameras, no headlines. Just funding for another year of student-led workshops, some new science equipment for the center, a small staff stipend for you, so you're not cobbling together shifts between the diner and classroom. It's already anonymous. They'll never know it came from me." Alana stood still, blinking back the flood of emotion behind her eyes. "But why me?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Keanu's answer was immediate. "Because you never stopped showing up. Not when it was hard, not when it was unfair, not when no one was looking." Alana's lip trembled, but she tried to smile through it. "I don't feel like a leader. I barely held it together." He smiled softly. "That's exactly why you are one." She looked away, overwhelmed. The river shimmered in the fading light. Her voice was small when she spoke again. "I didn't ask for any of this, Keanu. I didn't want to need help." "I know," he said. "That's why it matters." They stood there for a moment longer, just breathing. The weight of shame she had carried, years of guilt, years of silence, of feeling like she had failed, was loosening its grip. Not because someone swooped in to rescue her, but because someone stood beside her and said, "I see you. I still do." She turned toward him, brushing hair from her face. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, you can submit it, but only if the application talks about the kids, about what they're doing, not me." Keanu nodded, deeply moved. "I promise." The light dimmed further as clouds passed over the moon. Alana leaned on the railing, watching the water below. "Do you ever wonder if the people we've lost, if they can see moments like this?" she asked suddenly. Keanu didn't need to ask who she meant. The pain of that unnamed child still pulsed between them, quiet and sacred. "I think they live in moments like this," he said. "When we choose love over fear, when we say yes even when it's hard." Alana's eyes shimmered again, but this time with something gentler. Hope. As they began walking back up the path, the fir trees above them whispered with the soft breeze. Every step forward felt different now. Not because the road ahead was easy, but because it wasn't hers to carry alone anymore. When they reached the curve that brought the community center back into view, they paused. Lights glowed from the windows. Faint shadows of teenagers laughing. Someone sweeping, a parent in conversation at the front desk. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't flashy. But it was working, and that was enough. Behind the Bend Community Center, a patch of land stretched quietly between the chain-link fence and the river trail. It had once been overgrown with weeds and forgotten equipment, but now the soil was cleared, smoothed, and shaped by many hands. Volunteers had worked through the afternoon, students, parents, seniors, laying a simple curved path of flat river stones that glistened faintly from the morning rain. A reclaimed bench, sanded and stained, faced a young maple tree planted in the center of the garden. Its leaves trembled gently in the breeze, small but certain, already reaching for the sky. Alana walked slowly along the stones, her daughter by her side, her fingers brushing against the air as if tracing something sacred. She had known this was coming. Millie had whispered about it the week before, but standing here now, it was different. The space was quiet, dignified. It wasn't large, it wasn't elaborate, but it breathed with meaning. Keanu stood a few steps away, holding a wooden plaque in both hands. The plaque wasn't polished, it wasn't meant to shine. It was smooth, warm, and carried the rich grain of cedar. He held it as one carries something fragile. When Alana reached him, he lifted it gently for her to see. The words were carved with deliberate care. "For the children loved and lost, and the dreams we carry forward." Alana's lips parted, but no words came. She reached out and traced the grain with her fingertips. Her touch was slow, reverent, as if reading a language only her heart could understand. The tears that welled weren't the heavy, choking ones of grief's sharpest edge. They were light, cleansing, as though they had waited years for permission to fall. Maya stood close, her arm wrapped around her mother's waist. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Children know more than they're told, and in that silence she knew this garden was as much about her as it was about someone she had never met. Keanu set the plaque against the base of the maple. He stepped back, not wanting to take the moment from them. His voice, when he spoke, was low and steady. "This isn't a monument," he said. "It's a reminder that love doesn't vanish, that even dreams interrupted still shape what comes after." Alana pressed her palm flat against the cedar. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she turned to Keanu with a question caught in her voice. "What should we call them?" The air seemed to pause. Keanu's throat tightened, but he didn't shy from the weight. "Whatever name feels like home," he said softly. Alana looked down at the soil, the tender maple roots hidden beneath, the plaque resting firm. She whispered something inaudible, testing the syllables, then said it again, clear this time. A name chosen not from grief, but from love. Gentle, real, and lasting. The maple's leaves rustled in the wind, as if carrying the name upward. The work finished just before sunset. Long amber light stretched over the garden path, casting golden shadows across the hand-laid river stones. The volunteers had stepped away, giving space. It wasn't loud or ceremonial. No speech, no clapping. Just the hush of reverence, of something being made whole. Alana returned to the small bench and sat slowly, as if her body already knew this was a sacred place. Keanu was kneeling by the wooden plaque, carefully hammering it into the soil beside the maple. The words etched into it weren't fancy. They didn't list names or dates. Just a simple message carved by his hand and heart. Thus, hammer and inker, he said. Olanu and Pullet and Bellet, for the children loved and lost, and the dreams we carry forward. Alana read the words aloud, softly. Her voice didn't crack this time. There was a steadiness to it that hadn't been there for months. A strength that had returned, like an old friend who never stopped believing in her. Keanu joined her on the bench. They sat in silence for a long time. Wind moved gently through the trees above, shaking loose a single maple leaf. It twirled slowly downward and landed between their feet. Keanu glanced at it, then looked over at Alana. "Do you want to name them?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "I do." They didn't speak for another minute. She pressed her palms together, lips forming the shape of a name in her mind, a name she had once imagined saying at bath time, at bedtime, during kindergarten recitals, or whispered in moments of joy. She had buried that dream once. Now she was ready to release it, not into forgetting, but into honor. "River," she finally said. "If that's okay." Keanu closed his eyes and smiled. "It's beautiful." Alana leaned forward and placed her hand on the soil beneath the young maple. It was damp, rich, and warm from the sun. She pressed her fingers gently into it as if introducing herself to something eternal. "For River," she whispered. "May your name grow with this tree." Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small river stone, smooth and polished from years of water. He had kept it in his trailer since the day Alana had left all those years ago. It had come from a beach they once walked together, long before things unraveled. He handed it to her now. She turned the stone over in her hand and saw the tiny engraving he had carved, a wave curling into a heart. Alana placed it beneath the bench, near the plaque. She didn't cry this time. The tears had already come and gone. What remained was peace, like the quiet after a storm. They stood slowly. Keanu touched her shoulder and then stepped back, letting her linger alone for a few final moments. She looked up at the maple tree. Its leaves flickered in the light, soft and full of promise. For the first time in years, the ache in her chest felt like it had room to breathe. River would never walk this earth, but their name would live here, in roots and leaves, in wind and stone, in the whispered legacy of healing and quiet love. The bench would welcome others. The plaque would comfort those with silent grief. The garden, though small, would grow into something timeless, a place for all the dreams too sacred to fade, a place for River. The steam from Millie's old steel coffee pot rose in elegant spirals, catching the soft light of a morning sky slowly clearing its bruised gray. The rain that had soaked the town overnight had finally lifted. Puddles sparkled along the curb, the streets quiet for now, save for the gentle rumble of a delivery truck in the distance. Inside the diner, it was calm but humming with the anticipation of the morning rush. Alana stood behind the counter in her apron, one hand steady on a mug as she filled it with fresh brew. Her eyes drifted to the window, where the clouds parted to reveal a hopeful stretch of blue. Keanu's voice came through like a breath of thought, gentle, reflective, but carrying weight. Storms end, he said, not because someone commands them to, but because they were never meant to last forever. He let that thought linger before continuing. Bills can be challenged. Cycles can be broken. And pride doesn't need to be sacrificed for dignity. It can walk hand in hand with help when help is given, with respect. At table 6, 2 teenagers from the workshop program laughed as they prepped silverware and filled water glasses. One of them, Julius, had just started last weekend. He was saving up for a refurbished laptop so he could join Maya's after-school coding club. The other, Nia, had drawn the flyer for the neighborhood breakfast, now framed on the wall by the entrance. Alana moved among them with ease. There was a rhythm in the space now, a natural flow between young energy and lived wisdom. Outside, the familiar squeak of the bus brakes echoed down the street. Then came the soft thud of the diner door opening. She scrambled toward the door. Maya entered, wheeling a black Pelican case nearly as big as she was. Her solar kit was safely packed inside, each component meticulously placed. Her backpack shifted on her shoulder, a bright red voucher pinned proudly to the outside pocket. Millie stepped out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She grinned as Maya approached. Airport run? Maya nodded. Redmond to Boston. MIT won't know what hit him. They hugged tightly. Maya's energy was electric, but her eyes carried a touch of something deeper. Gratitude, focus, and quiet strength that had been earned one shift, one screw, one late night at a soldering station at a time. Alana poured Maya a cup of tea and slid it across the counter. Maya sat and took a deep breath, looking around. "This place saved me," she said softly. "No," Alana replied. "You saved yourself. We just made sure the light stayed on." From the far end of the counter, Alana noticed a folded note tucked under her favorite mug. She hadn't seen anyone come in, but that didn't surprise her anymore. She opened the note and read the familiar, careful handwriting. Not saving, walking with. She folded it, slid it into her apron pocket, and smiled. Alana stood quietly for a moment behind the counter, fingers grazing the outline of the note in her pocket. The smell of fresh-baked muffins drifted through the air, mingling with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt outside. Everything felt simple, honest, alive. Behind the diner, the sun broke through fully now, casting streaks of gold across the slick pavement. Across the street, an elderly man opened his porch door, blinking into the light. A soft buzz hummed behind him. "Ha!" one of Maya's LEDs gently glowing above his railing. Down the block, a group of kids gathered at the rec center, heads bent over a shared workbench. They were soldering again. This time for fun. No school credit, no award, just joy. Bits of wire scattered around their fingers as they laughed about whose blinking diode was the brightest. It was inside the diner. Alana glanced at the clock. It was almost time for her literacy workshop. Between lunch shifts and coffee refills, she'd been teaching second graders how to build sentences using pictures of pancakes and jelly beans. Last week, one boy whispered that her voice made reading feel like a safe blanket. She hadn't told anyone, but she'd cried in the back pantry after. She dried her hands on a towel, turned the "back in 10" sign, and stepped out the side door toward the community room. Behind her, the diner stayed warm and full. Julius filled sugar holders with precision. Nia carried coffee refills to a family that tipped with quarters and thank you notes. Life was not perfect, but it was working. Across town, Keanu walked the familiar bend of the river trail. His hood was up, but the rain had stopped. Leaves shifted overhead, water still dripping in steady rhythm. A single maple branch bent into his path. He touched it gently, nodding once before moving on. He stopped at a tiny front porch 2 blocks away. The siding was chipped. A "no soliciting" sign hung sideways in the window. Inside, a woman sat alone at her kitchen table, counting pill bottles and coupons. She didn't see him. Keanu slid a folded receipt beneath the storm door, a prepaid grocery credit and a copy of a note from the diner's silent donation board. On the back, just one sentence: "You're not invisible." He didn't knock. He didn't wait. Back at the diner, Maya stood with Millie near the doorway, pulling her backpack over both shoulders. The Pelican case waited at her feet, sealed and ready for a journey that once seemed impossible. Millie grinned, reached behind the counter, and handed Maya a brown paper bag. For the flight, Maya looked inside. Banana bread, a note written on a napkin. "Don't forget where you came from. Don't stop where they say you should." Maya blinked fast, then hugged Millie so tightly the older woman gasped, then laughed. "I'll be back," Maya whispered. "We know," Millie said, brushing her cheek. The bus rumbled to a stop outside. Maya turned once to wave at the windows, her red voucher flashing in the light. Then she stepped into the world.